Welcome to the deep dive. We have a very specific, very important mission today.
They really do.
Yeah, you are listening to this because you are currently studying for your English teaching competitive exams, your Oposiciones, and you are staring down one of the absolute biggest topics on the syllabus.
Oh, it's a monster.
Yeah.
The history and evolution of foreign language teaching methodologies.
Right. It's a dense timeline. It spans centuries. It's packed with names and theories and paradigm shifts. So our goal today is to take that giant stack of notes and really transform it into a clear, memorable narrative.
We are essentially your study companions for this session.
Yes, exactly. To help you memorize this, we're going to set up some mental anchors. We'll repeat the vital concepts, and we'll explain not just what these methods are, but, why they actually evolved. Okay, let's unpack this. We have a lot of ground to cover, but we want to look at the stories behind the theories so they stick in your brain. So to start us off, what is the overarching theme here?
Well, when you look at centuries of educational history, it's incredibly easy to get lost in the weeds.
Yeah.
Who invented what and what year. But there is a big picture for this entire deep dive.
Right.
The whole history of language teaching is essentially one single gradual shift. If you want a strong foundation for your exam essays, remember this exact trajectory. We are moving away from form-focused instruction.
Where the goal is just memorizing grammar and vocabulary.
Exactly. Moving away from that and moving toward meaningful communication.
Yeah.
Meaning the goal becomes actually using the language effectively in real life, unpredictable social contexts. Every single method we discuss today is just a stepping stone on that exact journey.
Having that map makes it so much easier to contextualize things. And to anchor the ends of that map, we need to look at two foundational names. You will definitely need to write about Noam Chomsky and Hymes.
You absolutely will. And you want to contrast these two figures clearly. Noam Chomsky proposed the idea of linguistic competence.
Linguistic competence, write that down.
Yes. For Chomsky, the focus was primarily on the internal structural knowledge of a language. Knowing the rules in your head. It's the innate biological capacity we have to generate grammatically correct sentences.
But then Hymes enters the picture a bit later.
Right. And Hymes argues that just knowing the grammar is fundamentally insufficient.
Yeah.
Hymes introduced the crucial shift to communicative competence.
There's that destination.
Exactly. He argued that truly knowing a language means understanding how to use it appropriately in different social contexts. You have to know what is socially acceptable to say, whom you're speaking, and when to say it.
So the shift from Chomsky's internal linguistic competence to Hymes's social communicative competence, that is the ultimate destination of our timeline today.
Nailed it.
So with that destination in mind, let's jump all the way back to era one, the traditional methods.
Oh, wow. Going way back.
We are starting in the 18th century with the grammar translation method. If you picture this classroom, it's heavily academic. And the vital piece of context here is that this method originally wasn't even designed for speaking to other people.
Not at all. It was designed for teaching classical languages, Latin and Greek.
Right. So what do they need to memorize for the exam here?
The main objective was analytical. The goal was to enable students to read classical literary texts. It wasn't about ordering a coffee in Rome. It was about translating Cicero. You should remember 3 core features of the grammar translation method.
Okay, let's list them.
First, grammar was taught deductively. Deductive means the teacher gives you the explicit abstract rule first, and then you practice that rule through translation.
Second feature.
Heavy, almost exclusive reliance on the mother tongue. The teacher explained everything in the native language.
And the third.
A strict focus on reading and writing. Listening and speaking received almost zero attention.
So you could be an absolute master of the grammar translation method, ace every written test, and still freeze up entirely if someone asked you for directions on the street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which naturally leads to a massive reaction.
Because by the late 19th century, international travel is increasing. Industrialization connects the world. People actually need to talk to each other across borders.
Right.
And so we get our second major traditional approach, the direct method.
The direct method is essentially the polar opposite of grammar translation, which makes it very easy to contrast in an exam setting. Where grammar translation was deductive, the direct method was inductive.
Meaning the students infer the rules from examples rather than being handed the rules up front.
Precisely. And the mother tongue was strictly forbidden. Target language only from day one. And the focus completely flipped from reading texts to oral communication.
But wait, if you can't use the native language at all, how on earth did teachers explain complex concepts? I mean, for apple, I hold up an apple. But how do you inductively teach philosophy or tomorrow without just pantomiming for 20 minutes?
That is exactly the critical flaw you need to note for your essay. It placed an immense, almost impossible burden on the teacher.
I can imagine.
It required highly proficient, native-level educators with boundless energy to act out meaning. Plus, it only really worked in very small groups. When authorities tried to roll the direct method out in massive public schools, it couldn't scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the limitations of those early traditional methods created a vacuum. They needed something that scaled, something systematic.
Enter era 2.
Yes, era 2. The structuralist approaches. We are now in the United States in the 1950s and 60s, looking at a method that completely dominated the landscape, the audiolingual method.
And to really understand this one, you have to look outside of linguistics and look at the dominant psychology of the era. You must link it to behaviorism, specifically the work of B.F. Skinner.
Behaviorism. Skinner, got it.
I want you to associate this entire era with the concept of habit formation.
Habit formation.
Under behaviorism, language wasn't seen as a creative, cognitive process. It was purely a mechanical process of stimulus, response, and reinforcement. Learning a language was just forming correct linguistic habits through massive repetition and positive feedback.
I always picture those mid-century classrooms looking almost militaristic, just drill, drill, drill.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking pattern drills, substitution exercises, endless repetition of pre-recorded dialogues. Listening and speaking were heavily prioritized. The idea was if you repeat the structural patterns enough, the pen is on the table, the book is on the table, you automatically form the right behavioral habits.
It produced students who could execute controlled drills flawlessly. But researchers quickly realized a fundamental problem. Mechanical repetition does not equal meaningful communication.
Right, because they'd perfectly repeat a 5-minute dialogue about buying a train ticket, but if the real train conductor asked an unexpected question, they froze.
Please, of course, they couldn't communicate spontaneously because they'd only learned to mimic.
And this is where our foundational figure, Noam Chomsky, steps back in to deliver the fatal blow to the audiolingual method.
Chomsky challenged the entire behaviorist foundation. He argued forcefully that human beings possess an innate biological capacity for language.
So we aren't just mechanical habit-forming machines.
Exactly. We're not just parrots repeating stimuli. Even young children generate completely new, unique sentences that they have never heard before. If language was just habit, how could we invent new phrases? That critique dismantled the audiolingual method.
With behaviorism losing its grip, education experiences a massive shift. We move into era 3. The humanistic approaches. This is the 1960s and 1970s.
The cultural landscape is changing rapidly here.
Very much so. Educators are looking at the whole person now. We call this the affective shift. The focus turns to the learner's psychology, their emotions, their anxiety levels, and personal motivation.
This is a vital era for your notes because it introduces several highly creative alternative methodologies. Let's explore the 4 key methods of this humanistic era. First is total physical response, or TPR. Created by James Asher.
TPR is famous for combining listening comprehension with physical actions. But the underlying reason why Asher did this is what's crucial for the exam. It has to do with the affective filter. Let's define that.
The affective filter is a concept that describes the emotional wall that goes up when a student feels anxious or intimidated. When that filter is high, the brain literally blocks out language input. Learning cannot happen.
So TPR lowers the wall.
Yes. Asher recognized that forcing students to speak before they were ready spiked their affective filter. So in TPR, the teacher gives verbal commands and the students simply respond with physical movements. Stand up, walk to the door. It feels like a game. It lowers the filter completely.
That makes total sense. Okay, the second method of this era is Suggestopedia, developed by Georgy Lozanov. I always visualize this as the spa day of language learning.
That's a great way to put it. Lozanov took lowering anxiety to its absolute limits. A Suggestopedia classroom used comfortable reclining seating, a highly positive environment, and specifically selected Baroque background music.
Baroque music.
Yes, the rhythm of the music was thought to harmonize with the body's natural rhythms, enhancing memory. The whole methodology was built around removing psychological barriers.
Incredible. Now, the third one is community language learning, proposed by Charles A. Curran. How does this fit in?
Focus on the word counselor. The teacher's role dramatically shifts. They act as a linguistic counselor supporting a collaborative group. The students sit in a circle, decide what they want to say to each other, and the teacher simply helps them translate and express those self-generated ideas.
Very supportive. And finally, method number 4, the silent way, developed by Caleb Gattegno. I've always marveled at this one because the teacher is mostly silent.
Getteggio believed in radical learner autonomy. He felt the teacher's voice got in the way of the student's cognitive process. The teacher speaks as little as possible, using physical props like colored wooden blocks called Cuisenaire rods to visually represent sounds and structures.
The learners are forced to actively experiment and discover the language.
Exactly, through trial and error.
Even though you won't see many high school students reclining to Baroque music while the teacher stays completely silent today, the legacy of this era is undeniable. We now accept that if a student is highly anxious, learning simply will not happen.
Which naturally paves the way for the most important paradigm shift on your syllabus. We are entering Era 4, the communicative approach.
Rising to prominence in the 1970s.
Yes, also known as communicative language teaching, or CLT. For anyone taking an exam, this is the holy grail. This is where all those historical stepping stones finally lead. We are prioritizing the ability to use language effectively in real communicative situations.
And to tie it all together, we return to Hymes. The communicative approach is built squarely on his concept of communicative competence. Mastering grammar is useless if you don't know how to deploy it appropriately in society.
What's fascinating here is how researchers took Hymes's broad philosophy and turned it into a concrete framework. To make your exam essay stand out, focus on the model developed by Michael Canale and Swain.
Canale and Swain, let's break this down.
They expanded communicative competence into 4 specific, interrelated subcompetences. You must memorize these 4 pillars.
Okay, let's spend some real time on these. Pillar number 1 is grammatical competence.
That is your traditional foundation. Explicit knowledge of vocabulary, syntax, spelling, and pronunciation. Knowing how to conjugate a verb.
Pillar number 2 is sociolinguistic competence. This is Hymes's direct contribution. Picture a student walking into a loud dive bar and using highly formal academic English to order a beer. Something like, "I would humbly request that you dispense a solitary fermented beverage at your earliest convenience."
Exactly. Perfectly grammatical sentence. But it fails completely as communication because it ignores the social context. Sociolinguistic competence is the ability to adapt your language, tone, and register depending on the situation.
Pillar number 3 is discourse competence.
This relates to how we string sentences together to create cohesive and coherent texts. Knowing how to use transition words, understanding the structural differences between an email and an essay.
And the 4th one, perhaps the most practical survival skill, strategic competence.
Strategic competence involves the verbal and nonverbal strategies you use to overcome communication breakdowns. When you forget the word for umbrella, do you freeze? Or do you describe it as the thing for the rain, use hand gestures, or ask for clarification?
Keeping the conversation going when your grammar falls short. So that is Canale and Swain. Grammatical, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic competences. Write those down. And within this communicative approach, the teacher transforms from a transmitter of knowledge to a facilitator, using pair work, role plays, and authentic materials like real train schedules instead of textbook dialogues.
And that evolution naturally leads us into Era 5, task-based learning and current trends. Task-based language teaching, or TBLT, is the modern practical evolution of the communicative approach.
Rod Ellis and Jane Willis are the key names here.
Yes, they took the ideals of communicative competence and structured them around a specific vehicle, the task.
Too precise for the exam. What separates a task in TBLT from a regular classroom exercise?
A task is an activity where learners use the target language to accomplish a concrete, non-linguistic objective. The focus is squarely on meaning. A fill-in-the-blank worksheet on the past tense is an exercise, but working with a partner to plan a detailed weekend itinerary to London, negotiating flight times, staying within a fictional budget, that is a task.
The language is just the tool to achieve the real-world goal.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for the listener? How does this historical evolution apply to today's secondary education classrooms?
It leads directly to the framework governing modern European language education. The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, the CEFR.
Very important.
The CEFR heavily promotes the action-oriented approach. Embed that phrase in your memory. Under the CEFR, learners are viewed as social agents. They are active social agents who use language to perform tasks, collaborate, and solve problems.
And to round out your essay, mention the current trends integrating with this approach. First, learner autonomy, teaching students how to learn independently. Second, the integration of information and communication technologies, ICT, Digital tools are non-negotiable now.
And third, the development of intercultural competence.
Right.
Intercultural competence is vital because modern pedagogy recognizes that language is inseparable from culture. It's about developing an open, respectful attitude toward cultural diversity. We integrate the communicative approach, TBLT, digital literacy, and intercultural awareness.
All right, we have covered an immense amount of history. Let's do a rapid-fire chronological recap to lock this timeline into your memory for your oppositions.
Let's do it.
We started in the academic 18th century with the grammar translation method. Obsessed with classical rules, deductive teaching, heavy reliance on the mother tongue. Then a reaction in the 19th century gave us the direct method. Inductive grammar, oral communication, zero mother tongue allowed, though it struggled to scale.
Then fast forward to mid-20th century USA. The audiolingual method takes over, driven by behaviorist psychology and Skinner. Habit formation, endless drills, until Chomsky dismantled its theoretical basis.
That vacuum in the 60s and 70s brought the humanistic affective shift. Lowering anxiety with total physical response, Justipedia, community language learning, and the silent way.
Which paved the way for the ultimate paradigm shift in the 1970s, the communicative approach. Hymes gives us communicative competence. Canale and Swain break that down into grammatical, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic competences.
And finally, this evolves into modern task-based language teaching, focusing on meaning-driven tasks, aligning with the CEFR's view of learners as action-oriented social agents.
This raises an important question, and it's something I want to leave you with as a provocative thought for your exam.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've seen how language methodology constantly evolves to match our understanding of psychology and society. But right now, we are entering an unprecedented era of rapid AI advancement and real-time digital translation. If the phone in our pocket can instantly and flawlessly translate our spoken words into any language, how will that force the educational system to redefine what communicative competence actually means for the next generation? What is the core purpose of the language classroom in an AI-translated world?
That is a brilliant and daunting frontier to reflect on. Exploring those kinds of implications is exactly the kind of critical thinking that will make your exam answers shine. You have the historical timeline, the key figures, and the underlying philosophies mapped out now. Best of luck on your oppositions. You are well prepared for this topic. Keep reviewing those anchors, keep making those connections, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.